and I'm glad you said that because I want to make 2 points to that. This is a discussion because we have continuing music discussions on this channel where I just throw things out there. But one point of view that I was stressing is the reason why we have the theory and the training. It's the fusion of the theory and the training with the raw soul and the improvisation of the raw talent. It's the combination that is really when music was at its zenith. You had the combination of the two. Because
Mm.
the father of American music, Louis Armstrong, wasn't classically trained. Matter of fact, he learned in a whorehouse at 8 years old. He played in the whorehouse. And he never
Mm.
trained, but he's the father of American music. But you see what happened. Miles Davis was trained and he improvised. But you saw when you fuse Miles Davis with Gil Evans, you get modal. You know what I mean? You saw it happen when you fuse Duke Ellington with his arranger. I'm drawing a blank to his arranger's name right now. Um, when you they have a way of refining because you need the key to jazz, the key to our music is constant innovation. You have to constantly be innovating. That is one of the core keys to our music. But when you combine, here's an example. Skip Scarborough. Confunction was a band that didn't have much of anything going on. They were a great band, but when Skip Scarborough, the person who worked with the Myers Brothers, wrote "Can't Hide Love" by Earth, and Fire, when he went to Confunction, he molded Confunction into that band that really had a sound. Charles Stepney's classical understanding of music combined with Maurice White's understanding of production is what gave Earth and Fire its boom. James Carmichael, the Commodores were a college band, but James Carmichael was classically trained, and he took their raw funk, their raw soul, and that the fusion gave us those string licks and those background licks. And it was the fusion when you had raw talent, how Quincy Jones took the Brothers Johnson, raw talent, but combined with the theory and with the openness to move on and expand the sound. One story that I learned I didn't even know until yesterday at my father-in-law's funeral, they were talking about the song Hello by Lionel Richie and the story about how that song came out. He said Lionel sent in, talked about it. And Lionel said that how that song came about, Mr. Carmichael came over to Lionel's house. And then when he walked in, Lionel said, "Hello, is it me you looking for?" As a joke. And then Mr. Carmichael said, "That's a song. Go finish it." And Lionel said that that's not what this is corny. Hello, what is this? That's corny. He thought Lionel said this is a corny concept. Then James Carmichael said, "No, that is a hit. You need to go ahead and finish that chorus and finish that verse, and let's put this song together." And through just them joking around out of happenstance, Lionel did the lyrics, James Carmichael composed the music, and we get a song that on an album that sold 30 million copies. So that reinforces what you said, and how, and same thing. Another story I heard yesterday was from Norman Whitfield's manager. He was saying Norman Whitfield did a similar thing with James in '73 when they wrote the Commodore's first hit, Machine Gun. It was like Norman Whitfield walked into the studio while they were mixing and mastering Machine Gun, and Norman Whitfield said, "Y'all about to fuck up a good song through overthinking it." And he came in on the mistake. They're trying to fix a mistake. And Norman Whitfield said, "No, that's the song." And they put out Machine Gun the way Norman Whitfield recommended. And that's the story that Mr. James Carmichael learned. And sometimes you just got to go. And the mistake became the song that became their first big hit. So I think we're agreeing in the point of, you do most definitely need that raw innovation. My point of view is just when I go back and look at the partnerships in music, when Count Basie would get in the 50s and the 60s, if you needed a hit, you went to Count Basie. You know what I mean? Sinatra went to Basie. Everybody went to Basie. When you combine the raw talent with the classically trained and allow space for the innovation and the new, because one thing about James Carmichael was he never relied on what he did with Jackson 5 when he was with Atlantic Starr. He never relied on what he did with Marvin Gaye when he was with the Commodores. It was all about, even though he was classically trained, It was all about new. Bernie Worrell, the keyboard player for Parliament Funkadelic, he was a classical musician. But you see what he did on those keys with those frequencies that that laid the groundwork for hip hop. But that came from a classically trained musician who also understood the importance of jazz improvisation. And I think that's kind of where we need to have a conversation for the up and coming artists.